Today is Ukraine's Independence Day. 34 years since Ukraine declared its own independence. Right there, you see Prime Minister Carney of Canada with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine by the Wall of Remembrance, taking on an even greater significance today. So while world leaders were all wishing President Zelenskyy congratulations on Independence Day and showing solidarity with Ukraine during these difficult times, Donald Trump was attacking the governor of Maryland and saying that Trump may withhold funding for bridges in Maryland because he did not like that the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who we've had here on the MeidasTouch network, invited Donald Trump to tour Maryland so that Donald Trump thinks twice before doing a military invasion of Maryland with American National Guard and other active military forces, which is also what Donald Trump is planning to do in the state of Illinois. Governor JD Pritzker had to respond yesterday saying, "Don't you dare send military to invade our state of Illinois." I just want you to think about that contrast, that juxtaposition between Prime Minister Carney standing shoulder to shoulder with President Zelenskyy by the Wall of Remembrance today, while Donald Trump is posting. Governor Wes Moore of Maryland has asked in a rather nasty and provocative tone that I walk the streets of Maryland with him. I assume he's talking about the out-of-control crime-ridden Baltimore. As president, I would much prefer that he clean up this crime disaster before I go there for a walk. It's almost as if you put this prompt into AI and said, what would a nasty, comical supervillain behave like? And you would spew out something like this. Then it goes on to say, I gave Wes Moore, as though Donald Trump was the one who did it. I gave Wes Moore a lot of money to fix his demolished bridge. I will now have to rethink that decision. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. President DJT. Yes, MAGA, own the libs by destroying bridges that everybody uses so that everybody dies. Real smart plan, everybody. Do military invasions of American states by the federal government. Real smart plan, everybody. I mean, what the hell am I even reading to you? What a humiliating and embarrassing, despicable nation we've become under this Trump regime. What a terrible thing. By the way, here is what Vice President JD Vance is saying this morning, because as we've reported here on the MeidasTouch network, which deserves more attention, frankly, Russia hit an American factory in western Ukraine, very close to, by the way, NATO borders, in an area that normally hadn't been struck with ballistic missiles. Russia struck this American factory, destroyed it. It was an electronics factory. So JD Vance was asked, well, are you enraged that Russia targeted American factories in western Ukraine? What do you think JD Vance said this morning? JD Vance said, that's war. That's what happens when it comes to war. Here, play this clip.
But was President Trump, were you enraged when you learned that Russia targeted an American company based in Ukraine?
I don't
was
like
that
it,
not a slap
Kristen.
in the face
I
to the
don't.
peace
I don't
process?
like it, Kristen. But this is a war, and this is why we want to stop the killing. The Russians have done a lot of things that we don't like. A lot of civilians have died. We've condemned that stuff from the get-go. And frankly, President Trump has done more to apply pressure and to apply economic leverage to the Russians, certainly than Joe Biden did for 3.5 years when he did nothing but talk, but do nothing to bring the killing to a stop. So you ask me what I'm enraged by. What I'm enraged by is the continuation of the war. What I'm enraged by is a presidency and Joe Biden who for 3 years did nothing to end the killing. What I'm actually excited about right now is that we have a president who's engaging in energetic diplomacy to try to stop the killing. That's as it should be. I think the American people should be proud of it. And whatever the outcome of this, whether the war ends in 3 months or 6 months or hopefully not beyond, but maybe, we should be proud that we have a president who's trying to stop the killing. He's done it, by the way, 6 wars that the president has brought to a close all over the world. This would be the 7th. It's the most complicated, but we're trying despite that.
That's what happens when it comes to war. These people are deranged. And by the way, let me just do a quick fact check of that Donald Trump post while we're at it. The bridge that Donald Trump is talking about, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, was repaired because Congress appropriated funds at the request of former President Biden. Let me just be very clear about that fact check. So that you just heard what JD Vance had to say there. Well, what does the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, have to say about all this? He's the guy who showed up to Alaska wearing the SSR, the USSR shirt to show Russia's imperial ambitions as he was mocking Donald Trump to his face. So what did Sergei Lavrov have to say when he was asked by Kristen Welker on the morning show about what his view was about Russia striking an American factory on Meet the Press? Now, what do you think he said? He admits it. We hit that American factory. Of course we did, he goes, but don't be so naive. They were clearly building weapons for Ukraine. That's why we hit it. So I'm just trying to show you, you have our own vice president in the United States taking a fetal position, submissive tone. Of course Russia's going to attack us. And then you have the Russian foreign minister saying, yes, of course we will attack America. How weak do we look? This is Sergei Lavrov from this morning. Here, play this clip.
This week, Russia bombed an American-owned factory near the Hungarian border. I've spoken to people who frankly see that as a slap in the face to President Trump, to the entire peace process, isn't it?
Well, I would say that those who are sincerely interested in understanding what is going on should know by now that never ever Russia deliberately targeted any sites which are not linked to military abilities of Ukraine.
This is an electronics factory, though, sir. This is an electronics factory. I've spoken to people on the ground there. It builds coffee machines, among other electronics. This is not a military site.
Well, I understand that some people are really naive, and when they see a coffee machine in the window, they believe that this is the place where coffee machines are produced. Our intelligence has very good information. And we target only, as I said, either military enterprises, military sites, or industrial enterprises directly involved in producing military equipment for Ukrainian army.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Carney posted the following. Prime Minister Carney of Canada goes, just arrived in Kyiv, Ukraine on this Ukrainian Independence Day, and at this critical moment in their nation's history, Canada is stepping up our support and our efforts towards just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Canada announced another $1 billion of aid to Ukraine. President Zelenskyy posts, we are building a Ukraine strong and powerful enough to live in security and peace, so that here on this square, on our Independence Square, beneath our flags, on our land, our children and grandchildren will celebrate Independence Day in peace and calm, with confidence in the future, with respect and with gratitude to all those who defended Ukraine in this war for independence, to those who endured, who prevailed, who gained victory. Such a goal is worth living for, and this is what we stand for. Happy holiday to you, great people of a great country. Happy Independence Day. Glory to Ukraine. JD Vance was asked more questions about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So what do you think about what's going on? And JD Vance goes, what I admire about Donald Trump is that he's not trying to focus on the nitpicky details of how this thing started 3.5 years ago. Again, the juxtaposition. As world leaders that support democracy are standing shoulder to shoulder with Zelenskyy, our fascist regime here in the United States, these Putin wannabes, these Putin bootlickers, we're not just being nitpicky about who started it. Who started it? Russia invaded Ukraine to commit mass genocide and to take it over. You freaking loser, JD Vance. You piece of crap. You piece of trash, JD Vance, which is what you are. You weak, pathetic chameleon. You person, you've mutated your identities 3 different times. You said you were gay growing up, that you were a gay man. Then you became an anti-LGBTQ person. Then you were for Appalachia. You changed your name 3 times. You were a never Trumper. Now you're a Trump bootlicker, which really means you're a Putin bootlicker. Who the hell are you other than a lifelong piece of trash fraud? Because I'll tell you how this war started. Ukraine was invaded by Russia. What a weak piece of crap you are, JD Vance. Here, play this clip.
Again, have they made every concession? Of course they haven't. Should they have started the war? Of course they haven't. But we're making progress, Kristen. And what I admire about the president in this moment is he's not asking 3.5 years ago. He's not, trying to focus on every nitpicky detail of how this thing started 3.5 years ago. He's trying to focus on the nitpicky details of now, of what do the parties disagree on, what do they agree on, and how do you build a foundation from one side of that ledger to the other so you can stop the killing.
And I'm not holding back this morning because I am freaking pissed. I am pissed that America right now is run by losers, that America is run by people who deserve no respect, by actual pieces of trash, by scumbags. That's who's running our country, and it is such a despicable and gross thing to see. Let me show you Prime Minister Carney so you can see what intelligent adult leadership looks like. Here, play this clip.
On this day 34 years ago, Ukraine declared its independence from the Soviet Union. And Canada was one of the first countries to recognize Ukraine as a sovereign nation. Since then, Canada and Ukraine have deepened our long-standing friendship, a friendship rooted in the shared values of peace, security, and democracy. Over 1 million Ukrainian Canadians call Canada home, which means that every triumph and every tragedy on Ukrainian soil is felt deeply right here on ours. Canada's support for Ukraine is unwavering, and we are with you every step of the way in your fight to defend your sovereignty and to realize your dreams for your country. Happy Ukrainian Independence Day. Slava Ukraini.
And meanwhile, here in the United States, our fascist regime for the bullies and oligarchs, they are continuing to cover up the Ghislaine Maxwell files. The Jeffrey Epstein files. They released the Ghislaine Maxwell transcript. They're going after John Bolton and saying, that using that as a distraction. They produced 33,000 Epstein files, they claim, to the House Oversight Committee in response to a subpoena. They were all basically old recycled documents. Here's how Ground News is reporting it. They aggregate all this stuff, all these articles. Ghislaine Maxwell was given a platform to rewrite history, says Virginia Giuffre's family. So Ground News is just reporting on what the family of a sex trafficking victim, Virginia Giuffre, had to say. Giuffre worked at Mar-a-Lago when she was an underage girl at 17. She was then recruited by the sex trafficking ring at Mar-a-Lago, where she worked at the spa by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And that's what her family is saying. Oh, look, it looks like from all of the coverage, like barely any right-wing coverage at all on the fact that Mar-a-Lago was used as one of the grounds for the underage sex trafficking. It's interesting. I guess what, on the right wing, you just don't report it. Just don't report on things, and then it just goes away in your magical fantasy fictional world. No, Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago was involved in the sex trafficking. Donald Trump said Epstein's a great guy, but you don't want to hear about that. By the way, that's why I use Ground News as my research tool. Ground News is essential nowadays for seeing what are they covering on the right wing, what are they not? What's the left wing covering? What are they not? What's happening in the so-called center? I want to see the dispersion of how these reports are taking place to see, are there blind spots? I use their blind spot feature. Is there a blind spot that right wing isn't talking about? Ding, 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 it is, because they're being fed propaganda. So use the tools that I use. I always get asked, Ben, how do you make these videos? How do you do your research? I use Ground News. Go to ground.news/MTN or scan this QR code right here. We're going to give our viewers 40% off Ground News' top tier Vantage plan. That's the plan I use with all of the tools I use. So if you want to research the way I research, go to ground.news/MTN. Ground News is subscriber funded. They don't rely on ads that could introduce bias. Subscribing supports our channel and their independent team working to keep the media transparent. One more time, go to ground.news/MTN or scan the QR code. Get that 40% off the Vantage plan. You've always asked me, what are the tools I use? That's the tools I use. Oh, look at this right here. Trump reportedly pointed the finger at his former national security advisor, John Bolton, before the FBI raid. Yep. Zero coverage on right wing again, as I'm learning from Ground News there, because Trump was rating him based on him writing a book in 2020. And Trump tried this stunt in 2020 to go after John Bolton, saying, oh, you wrote your book using classified information. Really, Donald? You stole nuclear secrets and you hid him in your freaking bathroom. You were bragging about nuclear submarines to some billionaire from Australia. You've compromised our national security more than anybody in the history, not in the United States, not to mention in the Oval Office on Friday, you holding that freaking picture that Vladimir Putin sent you of Putin and you in Alaska, and you were holding it up as though like your long distance girlfriend who you're in the honeymoon phase of your relationship with just sent you a photo and you were holding it up to the camera. Look, everybody, that's me. And that's Vladdy, and he wants to sign it, so hopefully he can come here for FIFA and we can see each other again for the World Cup. We don't want him here for the World Cup. What the hell is happening? And then in this fascist Trump regime, you've got bootlickers like this, Byron Donalds, who are like, and Trump's approval is at an all-time high. No, it's not. It's not at an all-time high. It's at an all-time low. It's the lowest in presidential history. Objectively, any person this time in their presidency, Trump is at an all-time low. It's like in the mid-30s at this point. But in Trump's MAGA fantasy weirdo world, he's 80% approval. These people are freaking weird, and they're dangerous, and they're liars, and they're idiots. Here, play this clip of Byron Donalds.
Against Donald Trump and against the Republican Party, weaponizing our government to do it. So I'm very happy that the American people saw through all of this and they decided to actually save our republic, save our democracy from the insane radical left, who even still today don't have any ideas, no policy about how they're going to improve the lives of the American people. This is why Donald Trump is riding high with all-time high approval numbers from his time in public office, because he's getting the job done and delivering for the American people.
And speaking of people like this, here you have Mike Lawler. Lawler is asked, okay, so, usually Republicans purported that they don't like when, the federal government takes over businesses. You usually try to fearmonger people and say, oh, that's what the Democrats want to do, and that's communism, even though Democrats don't do that. But that's so y'all are taking over companies now? Like you're just going to take over Intel? Are you okay with that, Lawler? Because, you promised that you would protect the people's Medicaid and Medicare in your district. You lied about that. You said you would protect their Social Security. You lied about that. So now you're good with just taking over private corporations and having the American government just take it over? Okay, Lawler, what are you going to say about that? Here, play this clip.
The president wants to buy a 10% stake in Intel. That company says it's going to now basically have U.S. taxpayers as a shareholder, own 10%. As a conservative, do you think that the government should have ownership stakes in private companies?
Generally speaking, no. I think when you look at prior history, when we've had, for instance, the bank bailouts, when we've had the auto bailouts, in the aftermath of the collapse of the market in 2008, the American taxpayer really didn't get a return on that. I think what the president is seemingly trying to do is get a return on these tens of billions of dollars that are being invested by U.S. taxpayers, into companies like Intel to manufacture chips. And so rather than just give the money away, get a return on that investment. Obviously, this is a national security issue. We want to be in control of the manufacturing of semiconductors. That
Congressman,
is critical.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
Policy.
I'm being told I have to go to a commercial break.
And by the way, more posts from Donald Trump where he's sending this guy, Ed Martin, who was not approved to be the interim United States. He was the interim United States attorney in D.C. for a little bit. This is the guy who represented all the January Sixers, says all the positive things about him. He's now like Donald Trump's like attack dog who basically just goes after successful black women, basically, who have government jobs. So he goes after Letitia James, and he like shows up like this freaking creepy dude, Ed Martin. He goes to Letitia James' home and stands out there and says, this is the site of mortgage fraud. Because Trump's other guy, Bill Pulte, pulls like the mortgage documents and he's like, look, they committed fraud. You said this was your primary residence, but this was your primary residence. And then he goes, this is the site of fraud. And they do the same thing with Lisa Cook, who's on the board of governors of the Federal Reserve. Again, a successful black woman. And this guy, Ed Martin, just shows up wearing like, he looks like Inspector Gadget in the summer, showing up with like trench coats. I kid you not. And he shows up there with the stupid hat, like literally dressed cosplay Inspector Gadget, you know, looking around at the home and doing these stunts. This is what's happening in the United States, folks. This is why we're calling it out on the MeidasTouch Network. Boy, was I pissed on this one, because I'm pissed at this Trump regime for what they've turned the United States of America into. A once great nation now behaving in this way. It's sad to see, but we're just going to bring you the facts. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. Thanks for watching this, and maybe the next one I'll be a little more calm in my delivery.
New Midas merch drop! Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.MeidasTouch.com.